The Shattered Tongue, Part 1. Chapter 1, The Stone That Shouldn't Speak. The night wind howled through the alleyways of Janet, a desert trade town tucked against the rugged cliffs near the Libyan border. It was a place of whispers, smuggled relics, and half-buried truths, perfect for a man like Darek Amun, who made a living diving into secrets that didn't want to be found. He walked alone through the back quarter of the sandstone souk, where vendors closed early and the guards conveniently vanished. The heat had broken, but the tension hadn't. Darek kept his hood low, his hand close to the hilt of the curved tool strapped under his robe, a relic blade forged from obsidian and bronze, passed down from his father. It had never been ceremonial. He ducked into a tent lit by one flickering lantern. Inside sat an elderly Tuareg woman hunched over a leather-wrapped bundle. "You came alone," she said in flawless Middle Egyptian. "That makes you either very brave, or very foolish." Darek smirked. "Can't I be both?" She unwrapped the bundle and revealed a stone tablet the size of a small book, etched in strange, angular markings that shimmered faintly under the lantern light. Not quite hieroglyphs. Not cuneiform. Something older, primitive in form, but too precise to be accidental. Derek's eyes narrowed. He'd seen hints of this before. Once, in a broken archive sealed beneath Karga Oasis. Once, in the back of his father's journal. And once, carved into a hidden vault wall that no one could translate. The Shattered Tongue. "Where did you get this?" he asked. The woman hesitated. Then. Gunfire outside. Shouts in Arabic. The tent flap burst open. 3 armed men in dust-coated black masks stormed in. "The tongue belongs to the veil, thief." Darek didn't wait. He grabbed the tablet, flipped the table, and shoved the lantern into the nearest attacker's face. Flames burst, catching the side of the tent as he dove through the rear seam. The night exploded in gunfire and shouting. He sprinted through narrow stone alleys, vaulting crates, leaping rooftops as bullets cracked against sandstone. The tablet was tucked tight under his arm, his other hand bleeding from a grazing shot. He ducked into a drainage culvert beneath the east wall of the city, panting, bleeding, alive. And the stone. It pulsed faintly in his hands. As if remembering its own name. Hours later, in a moonlit tent on the far edge of the dunes, Darek examined the artifact again, now wrapped in cloth. He laid it flat, wiped the blood from its surface, and whispered. "What were you trying to say?" The etchings caught the moonlight and flickered. And for the briefest moment, a second layer appeared beneath them. A code. Not magical. Mathematical. A construct designed to hide language inside itself. Not just a message. A map. And in the corner, a symbol Darek hadn't seen in 10 years. His father's insignia. He sat back, stunned. "You found it first, didn't you? You died for this." And then, from outside the tent. A voice. "We want the stone, Mr. Ammonius. Hand it over, and we'll let you walk away." Chapter 2, The Map Buried in Meaning. The voice outside the tent was calm. Too calm. "We want the stone, Mr. Ammonius. Hand it over, and we'll let you walk away." Darek didn't move. He crouched in the far corner, torchlight flickering against the inside of the canvas. The coded tablet lay on the floor beside him, still half-wrapped in cloth, still pulsing, not with light, but with a quiet presence. Like it was aware it had been seen. He reached for his pack and slipped the tablet inside. His fingers brushed the relic blade at his hip. Familiar. Solid. Balanced. Then the voice spoke again, closer this time. "You know what it is. We saw what it did. That script you're carrying. It wasn't meant to be read. It was meant to contain." Outside the tent stood 3 figures. All in desert-worn tactical gear, black scarves covering their faces except for the eyes. No tribal insignia. No affiliations. But the glyph embroidered on their sleeves gave them away, a serpent coiled around a broken cartouche. The symbol of the Veil of Sitesh. Layla had once described them in a whisper: they don't worship Set. They emulate him. They believe chaos reveals the truth. Smugglers. Scholars. Mercenaries. Bound not by blood, but by a shared belief, that hidden knowledge was power, and only the worthy should wield it. Darek didn't wait to be invited. He kicked the back of the tent open, scattering sand into the wind, and sprinted toward the shallow ridge beyond the dunes. Bullets cracked behind him, loud, sharp, far too close. He zigzagged between scrub, vaulted a half-buried stone slab, and dove behind a collapsed dune wall. They followed. 1. 2. Close. He unslung his relic blade just in time to catch the edge of a machete swing. Sparks. Sand. Blood. He spun low, slammed the hilt into the attacker's ribs, then disarmed the second with a brutal sweep. The third raised a pistol. Darek drew and fired first. One shot. Center mass. Silence. The desert stilled again. An hour later, hidden behind a stony outcrop with a flask of water and a torn-up map, Darek unwrapped the tablet once more. He wasn't alone this time. He'd activated it. Lines beneath the surface etched themselves into visibility as his eyes adjusted to the moonlight. It wasn't magic, it was angle-sensitive inscription, an ancient optic trick. Ingenious. Invisible to anyone who didn't look from the right direction. The top layer was still unreadable. The symbols seemed to mutate with each glance. But the second layer, the buried script, began to resolve into patterns. Not a story, he murmured. Coordinates. Not modern, but celestial coordinates, based on constellation drift and star position at a very specific date, over 5,000 years ago. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a copy of his father's field notes, the ones no museum would touch. The sigils and the margins matched the ones on the tablet. You were hunting this. You found it, and they killed you for it. Carved in the lower right corner of the tablet, barely visible, was a name. Not Builder. Not Divine. A modern name. Professor Elias Navarre. Darek's eyes widened. Navarre had vanished 6 years ago. Last seen excavating in Sudan under the patronage of the Ash'ari Institute. Discredited. Branded a fraud. Disappeared. And now his name was here. Linked to an artifact older than written language. Either you left this as a breadcrumb. Or they buried it with you. Darek packed up the tablet, buried the attacker's weapons, and covered his trail through the dunes. The stars overhead were sharp and cold. He knew what came next. He'd follow the map. He'd find Navarre, or what was left. He'd learn why the Veil wanted this silenced. Because this wasn't just a language. It was a code. And codes always have keepers. Chapter 3, The Vault Without a Door. The coordinates led Darek Amun into the high cliffs south of Bertal, a disputed zone where no country claimed authority, a lawless void in the map, and the perfect hiding place for something the world wasn't supposed to see. 3 days of riding across open dunes. 2 armed bribes at illegal checkpoints. 1 near-death encounter with a collapsed ravine. But the stars never lied. He arrived at twilight. The site was nothing. Just a stretch of bare rock and scorched sand. No tomb. No entrance. No markers. Just a half-buried pillar of limestone so eroded it barely resembled architecture. But Darek felt it. That hum. That resonance. Not magical, mathematical. He crouched beside the stone, brushing off the wind-blown sand. The surface was smooth, except for a shallow groove no wider than a reed. He reached for the shattered tongue tablet, wrapped in linen inside his satchel, and carefully aligned its edge with the groove. Nothing happened. Then, as the sun slipped behind the cliffs, the groove glowed with faint heat. A low vibration ran through the rock. It wasn't light that changed. It was pressure. The tablet vibrated softly in his hand. When he tilted it just a few degrees, the groove split open like a lock responding to a frequency. Not magic. Not a button. An acoustic key. A section of the cliff slid aside, revealing a narrow staircase descending into total blackness. Vault without a door, he whispered. Because the door is language. He descended. The passage curved downward for 50 meters before opening into a circular chamber of smooth, lightless stone. No hieroglyphs. No gods. No funerary offerings. This wasn't a tomb. It was a chamber of intent. At the center sat a stone cylinder half buried in the floor. One side displayed fractured inscriptions, echoes of the shattered tongue, partial symbols that seemed to flicker when viewed from different angles. Darek circled it once. No sarcophagus, he muttered. No remains. What were you guarding? He knelt beside the cylinder, brushing his fingertips across the etchings. The stone was colder than the room. Not natural. Then he saw it, a third layer beneath the symbols. Faint lines that only revealed themselves when he shifted his head side to side. Micro-grooves. He retrieved his multi-lens toolkit from his pack and scanned the surface. Hidden text. Not visible, but readable through movement. The text wasn't a story. It was a warning. This vault is not an end. It is a beginning. If you can read this, you carry the burden of understanding. What you find next is not sacred. It is strategic. The tongue leads not to power, but to infrastructure. Darek's blood chilled. This wasn't about gods or curses. This was about pre-dynastic engineering, a system built to hide knowledge across locations, across generations, across languages. He activated the final scanning lens. A projection, stone-etched and static, began to form above the cylinder. Not holographic. Optical. A map. But not of Egypt. Not of tombs. Of sites. Dots marked regions across the desert, locations of interest, all tied to the evolution of ancient script. From Nubian stone rings to cave symbols in the eastern desert to ruins buried beneath the Siwa salt flats. All bound by the same tongue. And at the center of the map, a glyph he recognized. A name he hadn't heard in years. Project Chihuri. The moment he whispered it, the chamber responded. Not with light, but with sound. A deep, buried pulse in the floor, rhythmic. Mechanical. The chamber itself had heard him. And from the shadows above, a voice echoed downward. You found it. Darek spun, blade drawn. A silhouette stood at the top of the stairs. A woman. Dust-covered, lean, a revolver holstered at her side, scarf around her neck, and the unmistakable glint of intelligence sharpened by war. You're late, she said. We've been watching since Janet. Darek lowered his blade slightly. And you are? She smiled, tight and unsmiling. Navarre. Elias Navarre was my father. Chapter 4, The Ghost Map. Darek stared at the woman on the stairwell. Dust in her hair. Gunmetal eyes. Her presence was calm, composed, too composed for someone who just stepped into a vault that hadn't seen light in millennia. Navarre, he repeated, rising slowly. She nodded once. Lyra Navarre. Archaeolinguist. Sometimes field medic. Occasional trespasser. Darek didn't lower his guard. Elias Navarre disappeared 6 years ago. He didn't disappear, she said. He was buried. Intentionally. Along with everything he knew about the tongue. They stood across the chamber, ancient symbols flickering dimly behind them. The stone cylinder between them still hummed, quiet and constant. Lyra crossed the floor, pulled off her scarf, and dropped her pack. My father found this site. Left pieces of it in his journals. He always said if he didn't make it back, someone would. She pulled a folded leather case from her satchel and laid it flat. Inside, dozens of sketches and glyph fragments, notes in Elias Navarre's distinctive hand. Derek's breath caught. These match what's on the artifact. I know, she said. He was obsessed. Said the tongue was the key to understanding why the oldest tombs have no names. Why some cities vanished before history started. He believed the language wasn't native. That it was. She hesitated. Imported. Lyra walked to the cylinder and placed a small bronze lens over one of the embedded glyphs. The image shifted. The projection, faint, optical, like heat rippling over water, changed. Darek watched in silence. What was once a desert map expanded, overlaying the Sahara, the Nile Basin, and beyond. It included tunnels beneath the Libyan plateau, submerged ruins along the Red Sea, and a crescent-shaped formation in the western desert, labeled only with a code. PD. Central Node. Darek whispered, Project Jehudi. Lyra nodded grimly. My father believed that beneath that site lies the central archive, not of knowledge, but of tools. Devices designed to hide knowledge, reroute memory, mislead language. As they examined the map, Darek noticed something strange. The lines connecting the nodes weren't straight, they twisted, braided, with seemingly nonsensical curves and interruptions. But as he traced them, it hit him. It's not a route. It's a cipher. He looked at Lyra. It's a moving linguistic pattern, encoded to match shifting constellations. It adjusts to when you're reading it, not just where. Lyra's eyes widened. That means the site can only be accessed at a specific moment, under specific star alignment. Otherwise, it's nothing but stone. Lyra pulled out her father's original field notes, crackling, weather-stained pages. At the top, scrawled in Elias's frantic hand. Alignment approaches, 17 days. Window, less than 4 hours. Derek's breath caught. That site in the Crescent Sands, we've got just over 2 weeks. After that, it disappears again for another 300 years. Suddenly, footsteps above. Lyra spun, drawing her revolver. Darek doused the projection. Shadows shifted in the stairwell. A quiet voice echoed. The veil knows you're here. A man in desert robes stepped into view, thin, sharp-eyed, holding no weapon. He bore the sigil of the Veil of Sitesh, but upside down. Inverted. They've activated the Southern Watchers. You won't reach Jehudi alone. But I can help you get there, if you're willing to burn bridges behind you. Darek exchanged a look with Lyra. She said nothing. Neither did he. But they both knew. The race had begun. And this time, it wasn't for power. It was for history itself. Chapter 5, The Crescent Archive. The western desert stretched for days without change, an ocean of silence. Darek Amun sat atop a rickety transport truck as it rattled across the dunes under a pale dawn. Dust crusted the corners of his eyes. His hands gripped the iron railing beside him, not because of the terrain, but because of who sat behind the wheel. Ramon Zahir. Former field agent of the Veil of Sitesh. Now, allegedly rogue. You really expect us to trust a guy who wore their emblem last week? Lyra asked, crouched beside Darek, notebook balanced on her knee. Ramon didn't look back. I expect you to stay alive. Whether you trust me or not is optional. They were following the cipher from Vault 1, recalibrated using Navarre's alignment notes and Derek's adjustments. Each night, Lyra updated the map using stellar drift data, cross-referenced with Elias Navarre's original journal. The cipher wasn't just coordinates, it was a mechanical function, guiding them toward a structure that moved with the stars. Derek tapped the rolled tablet stored in his leather tube. If this map's right, we're nearing the crescent formation by nightfall. If, Lyra muttered. If this wasn't altered. If the veil hasn't moved it. If we're not walking straight into a trap. Ramon grinned through the cracked windshield. Oh, it's a trap. At dusk, they found it. The crescent node, a half-buried arc of stone monoliths, scattered like teeth from a giant jaw. None of them bore visible inscriptions. No door. No altar. Nothing that screamed ancient machine or civilization hiding conspiracy. Just silence. Cold. Intentional. Derek dismounted, moving toward the largest stone, compass in one hand, relic blade at his back. The monolith vibrated slightly beneath his touch, not from magic or design, but from something buried beneath it. The archives under the sand, he said. This was never a temple. It's a marker. A shell. Lyra circled one of the stones, her fingers brushing across faint divots. They're frequency anchors, she said. Each stone vibrates at a different pitch. She knelt, planted a device beside one, and activated a low hum. A second later, two of the monoliths moved. Not lifted, retracted. As sand fell away, the center of the crescent revealed a perfectly round metallic hatch, 10 meters wide, etched in circular patterns of pre-dynastic sigils. Not Egyptian, Lyra whispered. And not builder. The hatch was seamless, no hinges, no handles. Ramon stepped up, handed Derek a black leather pouch. Inside, a small copper medallion shaped like an eye bisected by a serpent's tongue. What is this? Derek asked. A key, Ramon replied. Taken off a Veil operative in Hala IB. He died trying to use it. Why? Because the archive doesn't just require possession. It requires pronunciation. Derek stepped forward, tablet in hand, medallion around his neck. The symbols on the hatch began to shimmer, matching cadence with the tablet. He felt the pulse again, like pressure against his ribs. You can't read this like language, Lyra said quietly. You have to speak it like rhythm. Derek closed his eyes. He didn't try to understand. He let the sound of the symbols guide him, a low, stuttering cadence that felt more like machinery breathing than a language being spoken. He whispered. The hatch groaned. And then, opened. They descended into what felt less like a tomb and more like an engine. Stone corridors met metal scaffolding, latticed vaults shaped from some unknown alloy. Glyphs glowed softly on the walls, adjusting in real time to their presence, not displaying history, but masking it. This is a decoy, Lyra said, scanning the walls. What? Derek asked. She tapped the glyphs. These aren't historical records. They're misdirections. This place was built to trap thieves. Ramon cursed. Then where's the real archive? Derek stared at the glyphs shifting behind the walls, and realized. The archive's not stored. It's spoken. At the far end of the corridor sat a black pedestal, round, shallow, ringed in bronze. No controls. No text. Just a low hum, rising and falling in 3 tones. Derek stepped forward and laid the medallion into the shallow groove. It snapped into place. The chamber darkened. The glyphs across the walls stopped moving. And then, a single word echoed from the walls in a voice none of them recognized. Begin recitation. They were inside. The countdown had begun. Whatever Project Jehudi was, machine, archive, weapon, it was listening. And Darek was holding the key. "Let's see what they buried," he whispered. "And why they wanted to stay that way." Chapter 6, The Machine That Could Not Lie. The chamber pulsed with rhythmic tones, 3 frequencies in perfect harmony, resonating not through the air, but through bone. Darek Amun stood motionless before the pedestal, his fingers still resting on the copper medallion slotted into its center. He could feel the machine listening. Not scanning him. Not reacting. Listening. "Begin recitation," the voice had said. The air felt charged, thick with memory, but not the mystical kind. This was recorded memory. Archived, catalogued, and organized like an engine built for meaning. Lyra circled the edges of the chamber, her eyes scanning the walls, now frozen in smooth black stone, the glowing glyphs deactivated. "Whatever this is," she murmured, "it's not projecting anymore. It's processing." Ramon stood by the entrance, pistol half drawn. "Feels like a trap." "It's not a trap," Darek said. "It's a prompt." Darek cleared his throat. He said the first phrase from the tablet aloud, phonetically accurate, even though the meaning escaped him. The pedestal responded with a soft chime. Then a voice answered, not mechanical, not recorded. Human. Male. Calm. Query accepted. Please choose memory classification, origin, obfuscation, or correction. Lyra blinked. Did it just ask what kind of history we want to hear? Darek stepped closer. No, it asked what kind of history we want to admit. He spoke again, origin. The chamber shifted. The 3 tones converged. A projection bloomed from the pedestal, flat, clean, precise. Not light. Not hologram. Text. Streaming glyphs, translated midair into fragmented English. The system didn't store images. It didn't preserve myths. It stored edits. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Each one catalogued by date, location, and method of implementation. Tombs buried without names. Cities erased from stone. Kings rewritten into gods. Languages revised to redirect memory. Lyra's mouth went dry. This isn't just history. This is redacted history. This place didn't record the truth. It managed it. At the top of the screen, a symbol. A serpent piercing a sun disk. The official seal of Project Jehudi. Ramon cursed under his breath. They told us it was a code name. A myth the Ashari fringe fabricated during the occupation years. Lyra shook her head. It was real. A collaboration between high priests, early dynastic engineers, and scribe priests from Saqqara. They weren't hiding relics. They were hiding methods. Darek scrolled through the entries. Each one was a correction, an intentional lie, carefully deployed to erase dangerous knowledge. But some of the entries were more recent. Marked not in dynastic years, but with modern time stamps. 1944. 1957. 2002. 2021. Darek froze. One of the entries carried his father's name, Nadim Ammonius. Classification, correction proposed, denied. Linked artifact, obelisk of shifting speech. Status, suppressed. My father submitted a correction, Darek whispered. And they shut him down. Lyra stepped closer. He tried to undo a lie. Derek's hands curled into fists. And they made him disappear. Suddenly, the machine stuttered. The tones fluctuated. An override glyph blinked across the projection, red, harsh, intrusive. External intrusion detected. The walls flickered. Darek yanked the medallion free. The system powered down instantly, the air thinning as if it had exhaled. Someone knows we're in here, Ramon growled. They're trying to shut it down remotely. Lyra was already gathering her gear. We need to copy what we saw. Anything we can salvage. Darek retrieved his holocom slate and uploaded the scrolling log. Then something new flickered across the final line of text. Final archive node, mobile. Location unstable. Access via site theta. Authorization code required. Codename, the Engine of Babel. They escaped the vault under cover of darkness, the hatch sealing behind them with no trace of entry. The stars above were silent. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions. But Darek didn't look back. He looked at the medallion in his hand. Then to Lyra. Project Jehudi wasn't just a suppression program. It was a rewriting machine. And somewhere out there, it's still running. Chapter 7, The Engine of Babel. The border between Egypt and Sudan was just a line on a map, useless in the shifting dunes. But the Vale of Sitesh respected no borders, and neither did Darek Amun anymore. 2 days after escaping the Crescent Archive, the trio arrived in Argene, a wind-blasted checkpoint town near the Nile's southern fork. The place reeked of rusted trade trucks, engine oil, and bribes. The final archive's mobile, Darek said, eyes on his slate as the dust coated his boots. Which means we're not looking for a ruin. We're looking for something that still moves. Or someone who moves it, Lyra added. What do you make of this site theta designation? Ramon lit a cigarette and exhaled toward the road. Theta's not a place. It's a protocol. The Veil uses Greek tags for off-grid operations. Theta means information under dynamic lockdown. And the Engine of Babel? Lyra asked. Rumors, he muttered. An interface, maybe. A tool that rewrites linguistic structures in real time. Not to translate, to override. It's how they keep control of everything from tomb labels to regional mythologies. Darek stared down the highway. Then let's find the key. They made contact with a relic broker named Malek, a greasy fixer with blood on his knuckles and too many friends in the wrong places. He agreed to meet in the back room of a copper merchant's warehouse, where sweat and incense burned the air into haze. Malek didn't barter in coins. He dealt in ledgers, handwritten logs of what artifacts passed through which hands, and when. He flipped open a volume bound in leather that looked older than it should. A month ago, he said, a truck with no license tags and a military escort rolled through here. Left for the Nubian Bend. No customs. No questions. But. He tapped an entry marked in red. Theta, 7, C, 1 unit. Containment, Linguistic Protocol. Said to be headed toward a mobile excavation site run by a private firm no one's ever heard of. Lyra leaned forward. Coordinates? Only a name. The glass outpost. They reached the outpost by nightfall, riding an unmarked truck loaded with copper piping and forged paperwork. The camp was nestled between two rocky ridges, almost invisible until you were on top of it. Floodlights. Generators. Armed security. No insignia. Everything screamed black budget operation. Darek scanned the site through a scope. This isn't archaeology. This is containment. They're guarding something, Lyra whispered. And it's not in a tomb. They watched as a container the size of a rail car was offloaded into a metal dome at the center of camp. Painted on the container's side, a logo too faded to be official. But one word remained. Babel. That night, under cloud cover, Ramon guided them through the back fences using smuggler routes and local terrain maps. They bypassed the watchtowers, the thermal sensors, the tripwires. Inside the perimeter, they moved fast, Darek and Lyra toward the dome, Ramon splitting off to cause a distraction. Inside the dome, the air was heavy with static. The walls were lined with steel and mesh. It wasn't built for excavation. It was built for isolation. At its center stood a cylindrical machine, humming faintly, covered in cables and dials. Not ancient. Recent. But embedded into its structure were fragments of something older, stone plates etched with shifting symbols. Not in any known script. Not even the shattered tongue. This was something more dangerous. "It's speaking," Lyra said quietly. "But not to us." As Darek approached, his wrist began to burn, the copper medallion reacting violently to the machine. The interface flickered on, flat panels blinking in languages that shifted mid-sentence, not translating but mutating. It's rewriting. Live. It's adjusting terms, renaming concepts, based on whoever's in the room. Lyra gasped. It's a linguistic AI built on top of predynastic logic trees. They're using builder code to override living language. Then came the voice, familiar. Not a recording. A live transmission. "This is Director Khalid Rizim, Veil Command. You're not authorized for this node. Step away from the engine or be erased from operational record." Darek yanked the medallion from his chest and jammed it into the console. The engine stuttered. Sparks erupted. The entire system shorted. Sirens wailed across the compound. From outside, gunfire erupted, Ramon doing his part. Darek grabbed a nearby data core, heavy, warm, blinking red, and ran with Lyra through the shadows of Babel. Back in the dunes, under the rising moon, they collapsed behind a dune crest. Darek dropped the core in the sand. It pulsed faintly. Inside it, a backup of every name, word, and concept the engine had rewritten. A map of lies, structured and intentional. And it wasn't just historical. It was active. Chapter 8, The Names That Never Were. The desert before dawn is quieter than death. Darek Amun crouched in a rock alcove as Lyra knelt beside him, the Babel core set between them, glowing faintly beneath a tarp. Ramon stood a few meters away, rifle slung across his chest, scanning the dark ridgelines for movement. No sign of pursuit yet. But they all knew it was coming. "How do we even begin to open it?" Lyra whispered. Darek turned the data core slowly in his hands. It wasn't like anything modern. The surface was smooth stone embedded with micro-etched glyphs, old and faint, some of them builder, others from the shattered tongue, but it pulsed with a digital heartbeat. "It's not encrypted in code," he murmured. "It's encrypted in meaning." They set up a makeshift workstation in the shadow of an abandoned excavation pit, a satellite-linked interface rigged to Lyra's diagnostic slate, with signal dampeners blocking the core's tracking pulses. Darek inserted the medallion into the side port. The device reacted immediately. Not with data. With sound. A voice, neither male nor female, echoed softly. "Please state a forgotten name." Lyra blinked. "What?" Derek's jaw tensed. "It's not asking for a password. It's asking for a memory that no longer exists. Something the engine erased." Ramon frowned. "How do we recall something that's been deleted?" "We don't," Darek said. "But my father might have left us one." From his satchel, Darek pulled out his father's last journal, the one with suppressed pages from his fieldwork at Gebel Silsila. He flipped past the familiar entries until he reached a torn page, one he'd never been able to decipher. A word scribbled again and again, circled in red, with no translation beside it. Hramnin. "It's not a name I recognize," Lyra said. "No dynasty, no region. Doesn't match any catalog." Ramon narrowed his eyes. "But it shows up here." He pointed to a single line in the Babel core's interface, blinking. Entry 4382A, Hramnin, status, redacted. Erasure level 3. Darek spoke the name aloud. Hramnin. The core responded. Not with one voice, but dozens, layered and ghostly, cascading into static. The interface flared. Streams of data unfurled like smoke, no files, no folders, just conceptual structures, memory architecture, reconstructed based on what had been deleted. It displayed a list, hundreds of names, places, and objects that no longer existed in public record. But every entry had a code beside it. These aren't just names, Lyra whispered. They're cancellations. Scrolling through the entries, they found chilling patterns. Entire settlements that once appeared on pre-dynastic maps, now removed from every archaeological registry. Priesthood orders that no longer had bloodlines or temples. Languages with partial grammar structures, deleted before full translation. Tomb designations that no longer matched any active site. But the worst came near the end. Personal record, Nadim Ammonius. Status, disinformation leak. Initiated correction, blocked. Monitored until termination protocol 12 activated. Derek's hands went cold. My father didn't just find the shattered tongue. He tried to speak the truth it was hiding. And they killed him for it. One name flickered at the bottom of the list. Unlike the others, it had no code, no erasure protocol. Just Ketepare, High Architect of Babel. Lyra scrolled the file. The entry showed a figure robed in Builder-era garb, but the materials in the image were too new. The robes were replicas. The sand too clean. The eyes, alive. This isn't a historical figure, she said, breath-catching. This is a living person using a forgotten identity. He's the operator. Ramon exhaled. Then we're not chasing ruins anymore. We're chasing a man who knows how to erase the world. Darek stood, wrapping the core tightly in its shielding cloth. And now he knows we found his machine. In the distance, a low sound rolled over the dunes, rotor blades. A reconnaissance drone, small and fast, cutting through the twilight. Darek looked to Lyra and Ramon. We have a list of names they don't want the world to remember. Let's find one of them, before they finish the job. Chapter 9, The Architect of Erasure. They moved by night, always east, skirting satellite grids and veiled patrol routes as they closed in on the last traceable name from the Babel core. The wind sharpened. The stars above seemed to press down, and the horizon offered only rock, silence, and the lingering taste of something deliberately forgotten. Darek rode in the passenger seat of the stolen transport, the core pulsing faintly beneath the canvas behind him. He replayed the file again, one name, one title. Ketepare, High Architect of Babel. Status, not archived. Not terminated. They didn't delete him, Darek murmured. They let him keep walking. Or they couldn't find him, Lyra offered from the back. What if he knew how to disappear before the engine was even turned on? No one outsmarts their own machine, Ramon said. Unless they built it. The Babel core had one weakness: it could delete people from records, but it couldn't stop interruption artifacts, data echoes where things had been removed. Tiny skips in satellite maps. Snipped interviews. Timestamp mismatches. One such glitch had appeared in a 2007 geological survey taken along the Wadi al-Haytan fault line, an uninhabited valley where ancient whale fossils once lay beneath sand shaped by shifting tectonics. Except this report contained a blurred rectangle. A structure. Faint. Angular. Out of place. Someone built something there, Lyra said. And made sure no one would remember. The entrance to the wadi was narrow and choked with dead reeds. Once inside, they hiked nearly an hour through the whispering valley before they found it. Not a building. Not a tomb. An incision. A perfectly carved seam in the canyon wall, just wide enough for a man to pass through. No markings. No erosion. That cut wasn't made by water, Darek muttered. It was made by design. They passed through into a hollowed chamber. Inside, a single table of black limestone, and a figure already seated. Old. Still. Watching them with calm, lucid eyes. You shouldn't be here, the man said. We could say the same, Darek replied, hand resting on his blade. The man blinked slowly. Then he smiled. So. The engine failed. His name wasn't Ketepere. That was the name given to him, a cipher title, part of the early Babel prototype team. In truth, his birth name was Sami al-Dari, a linguistic engineer from Alexandria, once contracted by a joint Temple Museum initiative to develop adaptive translation software for dead languages. Only, the project didn't stop at translation. It became something else, he said, voice like gravel over parchment. The veil wanted more than clarity. Language shapes how people remember, and how they forget. He poured tea from a copper kettle. No ceremony. Just silence. When I tried to leave, they erased me. Not by killing. By removing the world's ability to know I existed. Lyra sat slowly across from him. But you're still here. Because I wrote myself outside the grammar they used. Darek placed the Babel core on the table. It pulsed again. Sami recoiled slightly, his fingers twitching. You kept it running. You let it see you. We needed answers, Darek said. About Project Chihuti. About what it's still doing. Sami stood and turned away. Then you've made a mistake. He reached into a stone recess behind him and pulled out a data slate, dusty, ancient in design but blinking softly. The engine isn't a weapon. Not alone. It was meant to interface with a second system. One the veil never finished. A spoken construct, capable of issuing real-time redefinitions. Ramon straightened. You mean, a field engine? I mean a machine that could walk into a town, speak 6 sentences, and change the meaning of history itself. Sami turned to Darek. There's something in the core. Something you didn't see. He tapped a sequence into the slate. The Babel device responded. Not with words. With a glyph. One Darek recognized from the crescent vault, burned faintly into the walls of the chamber beneath the desert. A silenced mouth. A serpent inside. A symbol for, final definition. They're going to use the core to collapse memory into a single structure, Sami whispered. Not lies. Not truths. Just consensus. One version. All others overwritten. Darek looked up, his jaw tightening. Then we stopped them. Outside the chamber, the wind shifted. Dust curled in unfamiliar shapes across the sand. From a ridge beyond the valley, a single drone lifted silently into the air, its lens zooming in, capturing stills. The veil was watching. And they knew exactly who had survived. Chapter 10, Final Definition. The storm hit just before dawn. Darek Amun stood with Lyra and Ramon on the edge of the wadi's cliffs, cloaked in wind and red sand. Below, the ancient path they'd taken to reach Sami al-Dari's chamber was already half erased by shifting dunes. They're not just coming for the core, Ramon said. They're coming for the man who remembers how to build it. Sami stood silently behind them, his eyes half closed, as if listening for frequencies only he could hear. The final definition, he said quietly, isn't just a concept. It's scheduled. Back in the chamber, Sami projected a sequence of timestamps from the data slate. One code had repeated in veil transmissions intercepted by his last drone before it was fried. DF01X active. Window, 36 hours. They'll deploy the update during a regional broadcast window, he explained. Midnight transmission, low bandwave encoding. Target region? Lyra asked. Everywhere with access to Babel-marked educational platforms and translation engines. Darek stared at the interface as a realization sank in. They're going to rewrite our words while we're asleep. Sammy leaned over the core and tapped into a concealed layer of the system, a silent operations log. The target wasn't just memory. It was terminology. They weren't erasing people anymore. They were erasing ideas. Concepts deemed destabilizing, politically disruptive, mythological liabilities. Among them, pre-dynastic free priesthood. Unmapped city, Secretu. Term cluster, the language before stone. Nadim Ammonius, unauthorized revival of pre-Eurasian dialect. They're not wiping knowledge, Lyra said. They're retraining understanding. And they'll do it through the tools we rely on to explain everything else. Ramon cracked his knuckles. Then where's the tower? Sammy turned to a location marked Site Aleph, deep in a restricted zone outside modern-day Kurga Oasis. That's where they're storing the physical conduit, the amplifier. It's what turns the engine from a recording tool into a weapon. They left the wadi before the sun reached full height, traveling under camouflage netting with a drone blocker suspended from the truck roof. The desert ahead was treacherous, and time was now a more dangerous enemy than the veil itself. During a brief stop near an abandoned communications relay, Darek sat with Lyra, reviewing the list of soon-to-be-erased entries they salvaged from the core. One stood out. Thothian hypothesis, linguistic framework suggesting language as the primary shaper of physical law. If they erase this, Lyra said, no one will ever understand why reality began shifting in the first place. Because no one will remember it ever could. Night fell fast as they neared the outskirts of Site Aleph, but headlights behind them came faster. 2 black trucks. No markings. High suspension. Tactical. Coming hard. Veil interceptors. Ramon shouted, slamming the truck into a dune-side crawl. Gunfire tore through the dust. Lyra clutched the Babel core while Darek returned fire from the rear compartment. The exchange was brutal. Short. Their pursuers forced into a ditch, tires shredded by pre-rigged spike mines Ramon had prepared. But they wouldn't be the last. They're not trying to kill us anymore, Darek muttered. They're just trying to slow us down. They reached the edge of the compound at 2 o'clock. Perimeter fencing. Electric towers. Satellite dishes taller than trees. And at the center, a slender, needle-like monolith of black steel and composite stone, the amplifier. Its base pulsed with red light, and low-frequency tones throbbed across the sand like a heartbeat. It's online, Sammy whispered. And the countdown is already running. As Darek crouched behind the final ridge, binoculars locked on the central tower, the Babel core in his bag vibrated once, sharp and clear. Not with alert. With recognition. It had found its match. The engine was here. And the world had 36 hours left before the truth rewrote itself. Chapter 11, The Amplifier. The air was too still. From the ridge, Site Aleph looked almost serene, floodlights casting long shadows across angled steel walkways and exposed wiring like the ribs of some buried mechanical beast. But Darek Ammonius knew what he was seeing wasn't serenity. It was precision. Everything in Site Aleph had a purpose. Every sound was calculated. Every movement was scheduled. Every mistake was erased. We won't get a second shot at this, Darek said, voice low. Ramon checked the straps on his side harness and tightened the suppressor on his rifle. We don't need a second shot. We just need one clean strike. And what about after? Lyra asked. Darek glanced toward the amplifier, now fully lit, its red core rotating slowly within its metal casing. He didn't answer. Because there might not be an after. Their infiltration point wasn't the main gate, it was underneath. Sammy had told them about an early test tunnel buried beneath the transmission grid, a now-defunct ventilation shaft from when the amplifier had been installed under cover of a solar resonance station. They found it by starlight. Sand had swallowed most of the exterior, but the reinforced steel hatch still hissed open when Darek twisted the magnetic lever and pulsed the override glyph into its lock. "This shouldn't still work," Lyra whispered. "It does," Sammy said, crouching behind them. "Because they don't expect anyone to remember it exists." They descended into coded silence. The walls were coded in layers of language, words in spiral arrangements, some in dead dialects, others in nothing recognizable at all. Not protection. Instruction. Protocols for the amplifier to recognize you as authorized, Sammy explained. A linguistic handshake. If it doesn't recognize your syntax, it shuts you out. Or kills you. They emerged into a sublevel chamber beneath the core transmission tower. Cables pulsed with internal rhythm, 3 tones, just like the Babel core. The language was alive. On the central platform above, inside a transparent control ring, a Veil tech team was preparing the final sequence. A countdown hovered in red over the console. 31 minutes and 58 seconds. 31 minutes until the final definition would transmit across all major academic networks and translation systems, silently redefining key terms at the root of global linguistics. "They won't just erase myths," Lyra murmured. "They'll overwrite how we explain reality itself." Ramon outlined the assault. He would ascend to the northeast stairwell and knock out the power coupling that stabilized the amplifier's satellite targeting array. Lyra and Sammy would access the subcontrol core and inject a looped reset command using Babel code, forcing the machine to misread its own sequence. Darek? He would climb straight into the heart of the amplifier and override the deployment command manually, if it came to it. "You'll have about 90 seconds once the countdown hits 5 minutes, Sammy warned. "After that, the system will go into self-protection mode." "Meaning?" Darek asked. "Meaning, it will erase you." Darek slipped through the stairwell while Ramon caused the distraction. Explosions lit up the outer deck as alarms wailed across the facility. Red lights flashed. Footsteps thundered overhead. But the Veil still didn't know where they were. Not yet. Darek climbed the inner spire, the amplifier's voice humming through the metal like breath. The closer he got, the less the world made sense. Words in his thoughts began to slip. Familiar concepts blurred. Time lost its rhythm. He reached the core platform. Inside the main console was a glyph made of motion, a looping fractal of verbal recursion, shifting endlessly. The trigger glyph. Below, Sammy's voice crackled through the comm. "Loops ready. On your word, I send the interference pulse." "Wait for my mark," Darek said, eyes fixed on the control ring. "Let me try the shutdown code first." He inserted the medallion. The glyph stuttered. But a voice responded, calm, authoritative. "Manual override rejected. Syntax unverified. Execute broadcast." Darek stepped back, heart pounding. "It's reading my language as flawed." "Because you've changed," Lyra said suddenly over the comm. "Since this started. You've carried too much memory. It's not just your mind anymore, it's your structure. Speak through it." Darek closed his eyes. He thought of his father's field journals. Of builder glyphs. Of the whisperer in the salt. Of the shattered tongue. Of everything he wasn't supposed to remember. Then he whispered, not a command. Not a shutdown phrase. Just a sentence. "We remember differently now." The glyph collapsed. The console blinked once. Then. Override accepted. Syntax revalidated. Final definition terminated. The amplifier shook. Cables snapped. Power surged across the spire. Darek dove as the console burst in flame. Ramon appeared in the smoke, dragging him to the stairs. Lyra and Sammy emerged seconds later, the looped signal still echoing softly into the void. And above them, the tower, dead. The world wouldn't change that night. At least, not the way the Veil had intended. Outside, the desert wind picked up. Silent. Cool. Lyra stared at the darkened amplifier, its lights now flickering out. It's over. Darek shook his head, bleeding from one arm. No. But now, we speak first. Chapter 12, The Archivist's Ledger. They left Site Aleph under the smoke-shrouded veil of dawn. Behind them, the amplifier's shattered husk still hummed like a broken bell, no longer dangerous, but not yet quiet. The damage had been done, not to the world, but to those who now realized just how much had almost been lost. Darek Amun sat in the back of their transport, wrist bandaged, shirt torn, eyes fixed on the pulsing Babel core resting in his lap. It no longer glowed red. The core had gone still. Dormant. For now. What's next? Lyra asked as she checked the map overlay on her slate. We stop reacting, Darek said quietly. We start remembering. Sammy had returned to his hidden refuge in Wadi al-Haytan, promising to begin gathering the remaining names on the Babel deletion list, those who had been erased but not forgotten. But before leaving, he'd unlocked one final layer of the Babel core, a metadata trail. Inside was a reference to a name neither Darek nor Lyra had seen before. The Archivist. Classification, Rogue Node. Status, Disconnected. Access point, Site Null. Lyra frowned. Site Null. Every Babel node was assigned a designation, Darek explained. But the earliest prototypes had none. They weren't locations. They were people. Ramon looked up from where he was cleaning his sidearm. So we're not looking for a structure this time. No, Darek said. We're looking for the one who never let their knowledge be digitized. The last person who wrote the truth by hand. The coordinates led them into the Nubian sandstone cliffs near the ancient trade route of Wadi el-Malik, far from modern infrastructure and long abandoned by historians who considered the region archaeologically cold. But the area had once been marked on a pre-Builder-era map found in Derek's father's notes, one that mentioned a village that never showed up on official records, Kemet Hazire. The backwards Egypt. It's a term used for forgotten archives, Lyra said. Places where information was stored intentionally wrong to hide it from invading scholars. They arrived by foot, after abandoning their vehicle near a dried riverbed. The sun above was merciless, but the trail soon narrowed into a crack in the rock. And inside that crack, carved in perfect spirals down a winding tunnel, handwritten glyphs in a dozen different languages. Some known. Some erased. All preserved by hand. At the tunnel's end stood a small domed chamber, circular, dry, and impossibly quiet. Shelves of clay tablets, folded vellum scrolls, and stacked stone plates filled the space like an impossible library. And in the center, sitting cross-legged beside a clay bowl of burned ink, was a woman. Old. Nearly blind. Skin like paper and bronze. Her fingers stained black. She looked up as they entered. Took you long enough. Lyra stepped forward. You're the archivist. The woman gave a dry laugh. Not anymore. I'm just what's left when the words run out. From behind her, she pulled a flat stone tablet, polished and covered in micro-etchings, visible only when held at a certain angle under the right light. It was the ledger. This is the original record, the archivist said, her voice soft but precise. The names before the engine. The versions of places before they were realigned. The truths we weren't allowed to remember. She held it out. Darek stepped forward and took it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Babel core inside his satchel pulsed once, faintly. "It knows this was never meant to exist," Lyra whispered. "That's why it's the most important thing we've found," Darek replied. The archivist leaned in close. "You think stopping one broadcast stops the war?" "No. You've only cut off a limb. The body lives elsewhere." Darek furrowed his brow. "Where?" "Where the tongue was first spoken," she said. "In the temple beneath the stone that bleeds. Where words were born to bind kings, and where they now wait to bind everything else." They emerged from the archive into burning sunlight, the ledger carefully wrapped in waxed linen and sealed with a cord of black twine. In the far distance, dust rose. Not from the wind. From vehicles. Fast. Armored. "We've got company," Ramon said, loading his weapon. Darek didn't flinch. He tied the ledger to his pack, fastened the cord, and turned toward the oncoming engines. "Let them come. We've got the truth now." Chapter 13, The Stone That Bleeds. The trucks came fast, kicking up trails of red dust in the morning haze. Darek, Lyra, and Ramon scrambled down a ravine behind the archivist's sanctuary, the ledger tightly bound and hidden beneath Derek's cloak. The wind stung their eyes, but it couldn't drown out the sound behind them, drones, not engines. The Vale had deployed hunters. "No more hiding," Ramon growled. "We find this bleeding stone and end it. One way or another." The archivist's final words repeated in Derek's mind. The temple beneath the stone that bleeds. There were references to it in only one known place, fragment 42A of the Nabta codices. A forbidden scroll that described a ritual site far south of Aswan, buried beneath the black monoliths of Gebel Uvainat, deep in the Libyan desert where few archaeologists dared go. And among those stones, there was one said to leak red mineral, a type of iron-rich calcite that looked disturbingly like blood. "It wasn't metaphor," Lyra said, as they reached the old expedition route through a dried basin. "It's a real geological phenomenon. A bleeding stone." "And beneath it?" Darek asked. "An interface chamber. The first one ever built." By nightfall, they stood before it. Tall. Smooth. Veined with iron. The desert wind howled through broken pillars and shattered observatory markers once used by astronomer priests. The ground was scorched in places, as if something had tried to burn its way in. The stone rose 20 feet, dark as oil under starlight. And from its base, a faint line of red fluid, seeping from a fracture no wider than a breath. Lyra crouched beside it. "The mineral's fresh." "Then it's still bleeding," Darek whispered. "It's still alive." Ramon found the crack behind the monolith, hidden by an outcropping of stone, sealed by a Builder-era locking glyph. Darek slid the Babel medallion against the surface, and the glyph shivered, then dissolved into dust. A narrow shaft opened, revealing a winding stone stair, no rails, no light, just darkness so dense it seemed to breathe. "We go in quiet," Darek said. "If this really is where the shattered tongue began, it's not a tomb. It's a trigger." They descended in silence. The air grew colder the deeper they went. Eventually, the staircase opened into a circular chamber, unlike any they'd seen. The walls were polished obsidian, inscribed not with gods or prayers, but roots of language, word stems, grammatical trees, sentence structures evolving around the chamber like a spiral. At the center sat a stone lectern, split into 3 plates. Each plate bore a single glyph. One flickered with light. One pulsed with tone. One wept liquid red into a shallow basin. "This is the prototype," Lyra said in awe. "The linguistic trinity. Sight, sound, and substance." "They weren't just encoding language," Darek added. "They were injecting it into the world." On the final plate, a tiny symbol shimmered. Derek's mind ached just looking at it. It wasn't a word. It was a linguistic algorithm, a syntax engine compressed into a single glyph. This is the first utterance, Lyra said breathlessly. The sentence that made every other word possible. And they buried it, Derek whispered. Because if spoken aloud, it could redefine everything. The walls flickered. The Babel core inside Derek's satchel pulsed violently. A voice, not from within the room, but from the core itself, sputtered. Origin site detected. Recursion unsafe. Suppress trigger. Suppress trigger. Suppress trigger. Suppress. Derek silenced the core. We're not suppressing anything anymore. He walked to the third plate, the one bleeding into the basin, and dipped his finger into the liquid. It was warm. And it pulsed with faint vibration. This isn't stone blood, he said. It's a living archive. As he stepped back, the ground beneath the lectern began to descend, revealing a deeper spiral stair, one never mapped, one not even mentioned in the archivist's ledger. From below came a rhythmic beat, like speech. But not in any voice they knew. Not a voice at all. A pulse of concept, waiting to be awakened.
Every story has an ending. But some mysteries live on. If you enjoyed this tale, don't let it fade into the shadows. Smash that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories that will transport you beyond the veil of the ordinary. Subscribe to our channel and your name will appear at the beginning of our next video, where we will pleasantly thank you for your subscribing. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a journey into the unknown. Share your thoughts in the comments. What twists did you see coming? And what secrets do you think still remain? Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and let the next story begin.